context that you and your team have provided. So, colleagues, in the spring of this year, Council came together to unify our priorities to best affect positive change within the community. We collectively agreed to focus on houselessness, community safety, and economic recovery as our top priorities. These priorities have served as the framework in every spending package that we've passed this past year. The fall budget monitoring process, or the fall bump, that we've been working to develop is no exception. The fall bump is one of three major budgeting processes that the city undergoes each year. In a typical year, the fall bump would focus on technical funding adjustments, with approximately 50% of the surplus going towards capital set aside to maintain city infrastructure. But this, of course, is not a typical year, and we're not facing typical issues. The pandemic forced many small businesses to downsize or shutter. We're still working to respond to calls to action from a revolutionary social justice movement. We faced 2 heat waves this summer, killing dozens, that sent us into triple-digit temperatures, and we're now preparing for a cold and unforgiving winter. All the while, houseless Portlanders have been navigating these challenges without sanitary or safe shelter options. Again, this isn't a typical year, and we're not facing typical issues, which is why I'm thankful that we're not allocating a typical amount of funds this fall. Before I dive into the specifics of these proposals, I want to take a few moments to reflect on the important investments that Council's already made in our priority areas with the spring bump, the fiscal year 21-22 budget, and with our first tranche of Federal American Rescue Plan dollars. Over $10 million was allocated to re-envisioning and improving our public safety system. These funds stood up our Community Safety Division, which is leading a ground-up approach to engage both the community and bureaus, including police, fire, emergency management, and emergency communications, in a coordinated way to ensure that the city's public safety work is transparent, effective, accountable, and fair to all Portlanders. We equipped the Portland Street Response with additional personnel and supplies to support the program's expansion. I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty for your leadership on this reform. We are now on our way to better responding to Portlanders experiencing mental health crises who do not require an armed police response. I'm grateful to you too, Commissioner Rubio, for leading the effort to increase the number of unarmed park rangers who've served as eyes on our community resources, provide information to families and individuals visiting our green spaces, and helping to keep these spaces clean. And we built greater capacity within the Office for Violence Prevention, providing nearly $4 million in grants for community-based organizations dedicated to reducing gun violence, and funded wraparound support services for individuals and families vulnerable to and impacted by gun violence. Nearly $23 million went into economic recovery to help ensure the experiences that make Portland special didn't disappear while COVID-19 prevented us from enjoying them fully. This came in the form of relief grants for small businesses and businesses owned by historically disenfranchised groups. We supported the Ankeny Food Cart Pod, musicians, and artists to preserve truly unique and beloved offerings within our city. And we funded measures that allowed businesses to adapt to the constraints of COVID-19 by opening our public right-of-ways to seating for bars and restaurants. Over $61 million went to addressing the humanitarian crisis of homelessness. These funds ramped up the impact reduction program's capacity to help remove tens of thousands of pounds of litter and biohazardous material from campsites. We continued to invest significantly in the Joint Office of Homeless Services and provided hygiene stations to improve access to sanitation. Commissioner Ryan announced, and we funded, the Safe Rest Village initiative to provide a point of entry for Portlanders in need of temporary shelter as they transition off the streets and towards more permanent housing. I want to thank Commissioner Ryan for those efforts. We also work to ensure our housed Portland residents were able to stay in their homes by providing rental assistance and instituting foreclosure and eviction prevention programs. The story told by these investments is one of resilience. Each of these funding packages weighed difficult trade-offs. We invested in innovative ideas like the Portland Street Response and Safe Rest Villages because Portlanders deserved more action and better results. With this fall bump, it's time for us to unite as a council once again behind our top priorities of houselessness, community safety, and economic recovery to deliver a funding package that fully recognizes the opportunity in front of us. The city is incredibly fortunate to be navigating an historic surplus of $62 million. These funds provide us with a crucial opportunity to address our most urgent needs, assist our most vulnerable community residents, and stabilize Portland while the upstream investments we've made and will make in the next fiscal year take shape. I'm going to take just a few minutes to walk through some of the key investments within the overall funding proposal, which puts $18.9 million into addressing houselessness, over $7 million into improving our public safety system, and $2.2 million into supporting economic recovery. I want to first thank my colleagues and their staff for our, at times, daily meetings to develop and finalize these items. I truly appreciate your time and your collaboration. This investment proposal focuses on infrastructure, human infrastructure. I want to begin by discussing the aspects of this package focused on addressing houselessness. I first want to thank Chair Kafoury for reaching out and offering to combine county and city resources to better address our houselessness crisis by leveraging our resources. And a big thanks again to Commissioner Ryan for your ongoing leadership on houselessness. I'm grateful for your partnership in developing this houselessness proposal. These were not easy conversations, and I know how hard both of our offices worked to form and finalize this comprehensive strategy. Council is well aware of the houselessness crisis and the unsanitary and dangerous conditions in which members of our community are struggling to survive. And each and every one of us as commissioners has been fully engaged in addressing this humanitarian crisis. We all know that we will not find sustainable housing solutions overnight. On Monday, I called once again for congressional action and federal investments to end this humanitarian crisis. That fight for support and action will continue, but Portland cannot afford to wait for that federal assistance to arrive. The county chair, Commissioner Ryan, and I developed a comprehensive 11-part strategy to provide a cleaner and more compassionate houselessness response. This package allows us to increase campsite cleanup 5-fold, returning us to pre-pandemic operation levels. It supports our outreach workers and increases our capacity to do outreach work. It offers resources like storage services and hygiene solutions. In addition, it funds greater capacity within the behavioral health unit, a unit within the Portland Police Bureau that responds to acute mental and behavioral health crises. I want to pause for a moment to thank Commissioner Mapps for his advocacy to expand the behavioral health unit and support Portlanders experiencing mental health crises or substance abuse disorders. This proposal also funds the creation of a street services coordination center, which will monitor shelter bed availability in real time and allow outreach workers and first responders to offer a bed that they know in real time is available. Our biggest investment within the package will provide an additional 400 beds within our short-term and transitional sheltering system. All of this is towards the unified goal of getting as many people off our streets as quickly and humanely as possible. Now let's talk about public safety. Yesterday, I held a press conference on public safety. I said it then, and I'll say it again now. This is the deadliest era in modern times for our city. We've passed a historical threshold of 72 homicides and over 1,000 shootings in this year alone in the city of Portland. Many Portlanders no longer feel safe, and it's our duty as leaders of the city to take action and deliver better results within our crisis response system. We planted valuable roots for change with our upstream community-based investments, but our strategy to improve public safety needs elements of prevention and intervention. It's time to get serious about improving the training, tools, and staffing of our police bureau. Investing in the 3 R's, refocus, reform, and restaff, supports a both and approach to community safety that works to fill an urgent service gap while supporting longer-term, upstream, community-based solutions to reduce gun violence. Refocus. Portlanders are facing wait times when they call 911, and our police and fire bureau are overwhelmed by the amount of incoming service calls. We need to ensure that we have the capacity to not only answer emergency calls, but respond in an effective and thoughtful manner. We need to fund a more effective 911 call triage system that sends the appropriate response service to each call. We also need investments in alternative policing solutions, including unarmed response. I'm proposing to expand our public safety support specialists, or the PS3 program, to 40 specialists, and I'm also supportive of Commissioner Hardesty's efforts to expand the Portland Street response. Reform. It's not enough to send the appropriate response to a call. We need to ensure that each responder group is equipped with the training, the tools, the resources, and the personnel required to do the job effectively. We begin that work by hiring a Dean of Police Education and Training to develop and institute research-based curriculum, training protocols, and procedures that align with best practices around training. We also need to build trust between our police bureau and the community by embracing measures like body-worn cameras that create greater transparency and improve accountability. Restaffing. Yesterday, I announced a significant goal, 300 staff for the Portland Police Bureau in 3 years, 200 of which would be armed officers and 100 of which would be unarmed community safety specialists. Subject to the staffing study to come, Chief Lavelle has said that this is a minimal staffing threshold for us to meet, and I support it. And I acknowledge the challenges ahead as Portland competes to recruit the best and the brightest applicants, especially those who mirror the values of our city, which are anti-racism, transparency, and equity. I expressed my interest in recruiting and retention bonuses, longevity pay, and rehiring retirees. I want to be clear that these interests will be dealt with as part of the collective bargaining process, and I'm hopeful that we can meet these interests through that process. While we prepare for the recruits to come, we need to address the record low staffing levels of our police bureau today. Retire Rehire is our most effective immediate response to our staffing shortage. This program will offer recently retired or soon to retire officers the opportunity to come back to work for a 2-year period. This will allow us to improve response times for our community in the short term while working on longer term staffing assessment and planning. Income inequality. has deepened during the pandemic, and we also need to invest in economic recovery, in particular, our small businesses. We need to do this while charting a course that prepares our city for future economic growth in our region. We need to fund the development of a 5-year inclusive economic development strategy to guide the city's work in creating widely shared economic prosperity grounded in racial equity and a transition to zero carbon. This summer's extreme heat waves emphasized the urgency of the climate crisis and underscored the disproportionate impact that it has had on communities of color. This investment, I believe, is key to laying the foundation for a carbon neutral economy and continuing our work in economic and climate justice. As we begin our discussion of these items, I urge you to remember the desperate needs and vulnerable community members driving this investment proposal. Much of what I've proposed has the potential to become an ongoing cost, which I would have been hesitant of in the past. But we support investments because we recognize the need to do something differently. There are fundamental needs in our community that we can meet, providing sanitary shelter to those experiencing houselessness, diversifying and improving our public safety response network, and supporting working families and small business at a time when people are struggling. Investing in these improved resources and innovative programs directly invests in the people of our city. We're not committing to a continuation of these resources today, but we are committing to being open to the opportunities these investments present. Join me in passing a fall bump package that is as resilient, compassionate, and forward-thinking as our community. Thank you.
All right, Robert, would you please